So now, the talk I'm going to be giving you all today may seem like a bit of a strange one, considering that I'm a minor, you're a group of my peers, their parents, and my teachers. But that's really the thought process that I'm trying to break down. So, when you hear the word drug, there's a wide range of things that you can call to mind. From things like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, even tobacco or alcohol. Or maybe the first thing they think of are psychedelics, like LSD or magic mushrooms, both of which carry the same Schedule I distinction as the other things that I've mentioned. Now, Schedule I is defined by the DEA in US law as drugs, substances, or chemicals with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. So now, is that really true for the psychedelics that I mentioned? Well, so this is a graph of the most dangerous drugs ranked by damage to the user, their family, and generally society as a whole. This is conducted in England, and as you can see, alcohol, heroin, and crack cocaine are some of the most dangerous for you. I'm sure I'm not telling you any new information by telling you that. But, as you see here, LSD and mushrooms are some of the least dangerous ones in all regards. So now, moving on. A friend of mine who I've known for about 5 years now has been diagnosed with clinical depression the entire time. And yet, never in his life has he once taken an antidepressant. When I first heard this from him, I was pretty shocked, really, because I figured that, being called antidepressants, they would be the most ideal treatment for someone with depression. And yet, the more that we talked and the more that I researched, I came to find that there are some pretty severe side effects when it comes to antidepressants. The most commonly prescribed class of antidepressant are SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are, obviously these are not entirely bad or ineffective, and in some people, and in many cases, they can be very helpful. But for many people, the risk that they pose outweighs the reward. So now, some of the effects of SSRIs can range from things like dry mouth or nausea to pretty severe side effects like sexual dysfunction or increased suicidality, especially in minors. Furthermore, in many cases, these symptoms will continue even after discontinuing use in what is called Discontinuation Syndrome, which is, for the most part, very akin to addiction, even though the DEA has defined that SSRIs are not at all addictive. But are they the only solution to dealing with things like depression and anxiety? Well, let me introduce you to 4 other solutions that are possible. So, here we have LSD, or lysergic acid diethylamide, mescaline, DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, and psilocybin. These are the fungi and plants that they're derived from. Now, with the exception of LSD, which has to be synthesized, all of these have been used religiously and ceremoniously in the Americas for thousands of years. They found dried peyote buttons in inhabited caves from over 3,780 BC, which is a pretty long time. In addition, they found psilocybin mushrooms from at least 200 AD. Now, these compounds were rediscovered by science in the 50s and 60s when these psychedelics burst onto the scene. Scientists, when they originally approached them, had almost no idea what they were, or what was happening to their subjects that were trying these things out. So during this time period, there were thousands of research papers written and thousands of participants in studies. And one of the most important things that they found from all of this was that in conjunction with the normal therapeutic methods, there was a massively high success rate when they used psychedelics. So now, I'm going to bring it back to the future for a bit. In 2014, a study was conducted at Johns Hopkins University where 15 chronic, long-time, heavy smokers who had tried to quit before were dosed with psilocybin. They found an 85% success rate in quitting smoking compared to the traditional methods, which only had about a 35% success rate. Now, obviously, this is a much higher number, and it seems like it has a great possibility for beneficial use. But of course, there's only a study group of 15 participants, obviously limited to the fact that studying this, since it's illegal, is very costly for the university. In a 2015 Johns Hopkins study, researchers proved that even a single lifetime use of any of the classic psychedelics that I mentioned greatly decreased the risk of suicide and suicidality in general, even just one lifetime use. So, if it has this great ability to help treat these mental illnesses, why is that the case? Well, I'm sure you've all heard the "this is your brain on drugs" speech before. But what really is your brain on drugs? Well, this is the neural connections that your sober, waking brain makes. This is the neural connections of someone who is on psilocybin. As you can see, these neural connections are far more vast and more intricate than anything the waking brain can offer. So how does this help people with depression, anxiety, and addictions? Well, in these kind of mental illnesses is a lack of neuroplasticity, which is your brain can't change from its original thought process. So someone who is an addict will only think about their addiction. They won't be able to have an outside perspective. But while on these compounds, it completely restructures the brain, and your brain thinks completely differently. For someone with depression who feels that the world is completely devoid of meaning or purpose, on these good trips, which can result in religious epiphany-style experiences, they can feel that the entire world has taken on a new meaning, and that there is a new purpose in life. In a different study conducted by Johns Hopkins again, they found that cancer patients who were terminally ill when dosed with any of these psychedelics found that it was much easier just generally be around people they loved, and they lost all the anxiety that was related to their illness. Even when their case was terminal, they still spent the last few months that they had with their family, enjoying every bit of it, all the way up until the end. So now I can't sit here and say that these compounds are the perfect solution for anyone. In fact, there are some risks. Of course, there's the bad trips that can occur, which are just to be defined as negatively themed trips. So if someone has feelings of anxiety or sadness, this can kind of come out on these trips. In some severe cases that are pretty rare, they can lead to a development of psychosis, but this is usually when this is not a controlled environment. As well, in people who have a family history of mental illness, these can increase the onset. So someone with a family history of schizophrenia, after trying one of these, may have an increased risk of developing schizophrenia. But that's why I personally am advocating that people use this within a safe, controlled, therapeutic environment, where a trained professional, usually a therapist, will be able to help guide people through these troubling journeys, and really just help guide them to developing their own inner personality. So, some of you may have seen recently on the news that Denver, Colorado just decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms. This is a pretty big step forward considering, like I said, these have a Schedule I drug distinction. Now, of course, decriminalized is not legalized, but it means that the state can't spend money to effectively arrest people who possess these compounds. So, furthermore, actually, the Imperial College in London just opened a new branch devoted entirely to studying psychedelics. As such, these compounds are now moving back into the focus of mainstream science, and they're deserving of your attention. So really, I don't suggest people to just go out and drop acid all the time, of course, but instead I suggest that you go out and do your own research, find out what these people's stories are, and how it's affected them, how it's changed their lives. Even look at the bad trips, because in many cases they can often be more healing than having a purely good trip. So when it comes to a time where you say, are we going to legalize it, you'll be able to make a really good, informed decision. Thank you.